Opening. This is an audiobook recording of The Vampire's Pet M.M. Vampire Romance, written by J.K. Jones and narrated by Chris Moore. Disclaimer: this is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The characters, incidents, and dialogues are products of the author's imagination. If you enjoy this journey into the dark and enchanting world of vampires and their secrets, please like and subscribe for more thrilling stories. Your support helps us continue creating immersive experiences. No part of this audiobook can be reproduced or recreated due to copyright laws. Thank you for respecting the hard work of the author, and we hope you enjoy this. Chapter 1. I tugged at the collar of my shirt for what had to be the 100th time. It was too tight, stiff against my neck, making it hard to breathe. A burst of neon erupted from the disco ball, sending jagged streaks of color in every direction. The lights flickered like fireworks, exploding in time with the bass drops, bathing the dancers in a kaleidoscope of electric blues, fiery oranges, and glowing purples. It was like standing inside a living painting that constantly shifted with the pulse of the music. "I need aqua!" Lance shouted in my ear, and I gave a curt nod, watching him weave through the thick crowds to the bartender. He leaned over the bar, giving everyone in the vicinity a view of his perky ass as he was handed 2 bottles of water. Lance shoved one into my hand and began chugging his down, like he was dying of thirst. "Have you seen him yet?" He peered around the room, his eyes darting about like the vampire would pop out of nowhere. I scoffed, toying with the lapels of my suit. "I can't believe how gullible you are. He isn't a real vampire." Lance cut his eyes at me. "If I wanted a whining baby, I would have just brought my sister." My jaw twitched. "Maybe you should have." "Unfortunately, she isn't as hot as you, so you'll have to do." I ignored him, not sure why I even bothered talking to Lance to begin with. The disco lights soaked his blonde hair in a variety of neon colors. He had a bleach blonde surfer look going on that most guys seem to fall for, but his attitude was like taking a nosedive into the dumpster. We hadn't been friends for long, and I wanted to keep it that way. A guy with huge muscles straining his shirt caught Lance's eyes and stopped. "Hello there," he drawled. "Do you and your friend care to dance?" "We aren't friends," Lance and I said at the same time. Lance shoved his bottle of water into my hand and bounced over to the man, who whisked him straight onto the dance floor. I sighed hard, trying not to get annoyed at him leaving me again, but then again, it really didn't matter anyway. There was a rumor that this underground club was crawling with supernaturals, from witches to vampires to werewolves. It was all a joke, of course, to get people in through the doors. A good publicity stunt, if you asked me. Although I couldn't deny that it was somewhat stifling being in here. The club's atmosphere was electric, the air pulsing in time with the heavy beat that rattled through the floor. But amidst the crush of bodies and the swirl of scents, something dark cut through, the faint, unmistakable tang of blood. It clung to the air like a secret, just strong enough to send a shiver down my spine, hinting at violence hidden behind the flashing lights and pounding music, which was utter nonsense. Nocturne Haven was just like all the other clubs I'd been dragged to by Lance, who seemed to have some kind of sick fascination with vampires these days, after having spent a night with one several weeks ago, or so he claimed. Honestly, Lance needed to lay off the narcotics. Maybe then he wouldn't be hallucinating so much. I unscrewed the cap of my water and drank, staring at the supposed supernaturals dripping in wealth and power. I was a simple guy from Philly. I didn't care who screwed who and had no desire to be among the elites. But Lance did, hence why we were here in the first place. I watched them glide through the room like they owned the place, some sticking to the shadows, while others laughed like hyenas near tables stacked with champagne flues and tiny hors d'oeuvres that looked too pretty to eat. The chandeliers above gleamed, casting a warm glow over the room. Everything felt suffocatingly perfect. "Hey!" Lance bounced over to me, his forehead drenched in sweat. He was pretty hot. "I can see that," I muttered. "Why did you stop dancing with him?" "How's my hair?" Lance tossed his blonde hair out of his eyes and scanned the room with an almost frantic energy. He'll be here soon. I can almost feel it. Right. Did I mention the guy Lance had the most amazing night with was apparently the Vampire King? Trust me, I wish I was making it up. Vincent Nightshade was the billionaire tycoon who had built a mongrel empire from cryptocurrency and stocks, exploding almost overnight. Some even said he was richer than the Queen of England, but only appeared at night, hence why they called him the Vampire King. Huh. I hummed, checking the time. God, it was only 10:30. I thought of making an excuse to leave, but I knew Lance would just come find me later. We were roommates at the University of Pennsylvania. I was studying pre-med, and he was studying psychology, which was strange because Lance seemed to spend most of his time getting drunk at parties and nursing hangovers. God, I can't stand it, Lance said somewhat breathlessly. What if he doesn't recognize me? He most certainly won't, considering you've spent your date face down, ass up, I muttered. I'm serious, Sydney, he huffed. I blinked at him. So am I. I have no idea why I invited you to these things. This was an exclusive party, and all you've done is check your phone and stare at the exit. Whatever. Consider this the last time we hang out together. You were just so pathetic standing by yourself all freshman year, so excuse me for taking pity on you. Lance stared down his nose at me. This is the last time I did something nice. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving me standing there with rage curling in my gut. A part of me wanted to take hold of his neck and rip out his throat. I felt a familiar ache in my gums as I fought the itch. I gripped the bottle of water so hard that it crunched and burst, splashing water on the brand new suit I had bought for the club. Asshole, I hissed to Lance's back, but he was gone now, swallowed up by the crowd, leaving me standing there in drenched clothing. Why the hell did I go anywhere with that guy? It was the same song and dance, and maybe he was right. Maybe I was just so freaking pathetic that he took pity on me and became my friend, whatever. I shoved my way to the bathroom where people were standing around, crowding every inch of available space. They laughed, gossiped, and occasionally glanced my way. Their stares were sharp, dissecting. I pretended not to notice the whispers behind manicured hands and polished fingernails. The place reeked of power, money, and danger. Everything I wanted no part of. I'd dry off my clothes and call a cab. It was stupid to come here anyway. I walked inside the washroom, which was washed in a bright red neon glow. The room smelled faintly of antiseptics and a twang of blood that set my teeth on edge. Why the long face? A voice said. I jumped, whipping my head around to stare at the man who had bled from the shadows, and walked further into the bathroom. His feet made no noise against the tile floors, and for some reason, my heart was trying to climb out of my chest. Jesus, warn a guy before you do that, I hissed, placing a hand over my chest. I almost went into cardiac arrest. A deep chuckle rumbled out of him, but his face was still enclosed in shadow. The stranger stood by the stalls, his figure barely visible in the dim light filtering through the bathroom. I kept my gaze on him through the large mirror, my reflection almost forgotten as I focused on his shadowed form. He didn't move, just watched me in that unnerving, silent way of his, the air thick with tension between us. You didn't answer my question. I spilled water all over the suit I rented, I mumbled, then grabbed some toilet paper to dab at the blazer. It's ruined now. A rented suit? The man said, his voice curious. I didn't know people still did that. Yeah, well, I grinded my teeth together. Then I got into a fight with my roommate, so it was pointless. Now I'm out $500. I see. I guess that is a good enough reason to have a long face, the stranger replied. But who knows? Maybe the night will turn around for you. I scoffed. If he knew my life, he wouldn't be saying that. I went back to scrubbing my suit with toilet paper, which seemed to groan under the pressure of my frantic movements. Its thin sheets protesting as I tried to erase the evidence of my clumsiness. We have air dryers over there, you know, the man pointed out. I paused, my face flushing. Yeah? Well, I didn't see them. This place looks like a blood-red murder room. I walked over to the dryer and turned it on. I wonder what the owner was thinking when he decided to put these lights in here. He must have been deranged or something. I can assure you he was perfectly sane when he thought about the decor, the man replied easily. No, I don't think so, I continued on. I mean, the club looks nice, but also reminds me of one of those dumps in the red light district. Oh, and you know all of this from experience, the man drawled, and a light clicked as he lit a cigarette, but it only managed to light up the bottom half of his face. I took in the clean cut of his chiseled jaw, the bristled hairs that covered his chin and neck, and God, from just half his face, I could tell he was handsome. Gorgeous, even. Pleasure shot through me, and I forced myself to look away and focus on drying my clothes. Smoke wafted into the air, filling my nostrils. Yes. No, it's just cheesy, that's all I mean. A cynic? The man continued with a smirk. I like cynics. I prefer the term pessimist, I shot back. But hey, call it what you want. I'm just here for the free existential crisis. Is that all you're free for? I was under the impression between you and your friend, you were free for a lot more. I fought back a flinch, going back to drying my clothes. It was stupid, but shame crawled over my skin. This wasn't my first time doing it, and that was why Lance and I had a special kind of relationship, going beyond roommates. But I wouldn't call him my friend. I didn't have any friends. We were more like business partners, or rent boys to be exact, even though I hated the term. My eyes flicked up to the man whose face was still swallowed by darkness, and I caught my reflection in the mirror. Dark blue eyes stared back at me, my jaw clean since I never could grow facial hair. No matter how hard I tried, my body was compact and lithe but strong, since I spent hours in the gym. This guy and I were around the same height, but he was broader, bulkier, and it seemed as if that crisp suit was hiding more than enough muscle. The stranger's suit clung to his form with tailored precision, the deep burgundy fabric gleaming subtly under the low light of the club. His black Doc Martens polished to a high shine, their classic silhouette grounding the striking outfit. God, this man was a work of art, and clearly, he'd been watching me and Lance since we entered the club. Okay, Lance, sure, I get it. He was gorgeous. But me? I was a nobody. Just a wannabe doctor and part-time rent boy who could diagnose every disease except single and hopeless. Let's face it, the only real chemistry I had was in a lab. A sudden rush of longing washed over me, pulling me under its spell and enveloping me in an intoxicating haze. I straightened my spine. Yes, depends on who's asking. The man walked closer, the cigarette a red dot of flame as he drew it between his thin lips. I am asking, are you free for more? I could faintly hear an accent in his voice. Slavic, perhaps? Scandinavian? It was almost impossible to tell, but it reminded me faintly of my mother before she passed. Yes, I whispered, my pulse throbbing. The man regarded me, and even though I couldn't see his eyes, I could feel them tracing my skin, devouring every available inch. He stamped out his cigarette in an ashtray I didn't realize was nearby, and calmly walked out. I stood there for several minutes, panting hard. My clothes were dry, and I chewed on my lower lip, wondering if I should bother going home or staying here. A large part of me was curious to see if and when his proposition would play out. Checking my phone, I sighed when I saw my bank account balance was in the negative and gritted my teeth. I had spent the last of my money on this damn suit, and it was time to get back to work. No matter how much Lance and I didn't get along, I wasn't here to make friends. Slipping back into the club, I saw Lance talking to the same guy earlier, pressed up against him while the bulky man ran his hands down Lance's slacks, roaming until landing on the swell of his ass. I went back to my spot near the corner, trying to appear more approachable. That's when I felt it. The room changed. I couldn't explain it, but it was like the air itself shifted. Colder, more electric. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my ears twitched again, picking up on the sudden hush that swept across the crowd. Conversations died mid-sentence. Laughter fizzled out. People turned, their eyes tracking something or someone making an entrance. I followed their gaze, my stomach twisting with something I couldn't quite place. Vincent. I knew who he was before anyone whispered his name. Everyone in the club knew him. He was powerful, dangerous. His reputation preceded him wherever he went. I strained my neck trying to get a glimpse because the shoulder looked familiar. He was mesmerizing in the most terrifying way possible. Tall, with an impossibly sharp jawline and eyes that seemed to pierce through anyone who dared meet them. His movements were fluid and controlled, like every step he took was deliberate. Like every inch of space around him belonged to him. A makeshift stage had been set up, and it would have been almost comical, except the air was buzzing around me. So fast and furious, the edges of my vision fuzzed. Vincent climbed the stairs 2 at a time and then sat down. The air throbbed with the bass, heavy and thick as if the sound itself carried weight. Beneath the layers of perfume and sweat, there was something sharper, more primal, the faint metallic tang of blood. My instincts were screaming at me to move to get the hell out of there, but my feet stayed rooted to the spot. Draped in shadow, Vincent Nightshade lounged on the golden throne with a cruel kind of grace, the opulence of the seat contrasting with the lethal edge in his posture. His dark eyes gleamed like polished obsidian, tracking the room with a slow, predatory calm. The flicker of the club lights danced across his sharp features, making him look more myth than man. And yet there was no denying the truth whispered through the crowd. The Vampire King. What nonsense, I scoffed inwardly. These people truly were fanatics. Yet I couldn't look away. I didn't want to, even though every instinct howled at me to hide, to get as far away from him as possible. He noticed me. I don't know how I knew, but I did. 1 second his eyes were scanning the room, and the next, they locked onto mine. My breath caught in my throat. His gaze was like a vice, pulling me in, holding me captive. I felt exposed, like he could see straight through me. The heat in his stare made my skin tingle, even from across the room. And then he smiled. Not a full smile, just the ghost of one. It was the kind of smile that said he knew exactly what kind of effect he had on people, and that he enjoyed it. So he was the guy from the bathroom. Figured my luck would be this crap. And wasn't he the owner of the club too? Oh God, I insulted his tacky decor, but I could tell it amused him somewhat to hear my thoughts. Without breaking eye contact, he started walking toward me. Oh no, 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 no. My stomach dropped, and I fought the urge to bolt, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, like a deer caught in headlights, watching as this impossibly powerful man, this predator, made his way through the crowd with ease. People stepped aside for him like he was parting the sea. All the while, his eyes stayed on me, never wavering. He stopped right in front of me, and I couldn't breathe. Enjoying the party? His voice was deep, smooth, and far too close. I blinked up at him, struggling to find words. My throat felt tight, and my brain was running in circles, trying to figure out how the hell I was supposed to respond to him. It's nice, I stammered, wincing at how stupid I sounded. Nice? Really, Sydney? That's the best you've got? Vincent's smile widened, just a fraction, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. Now that I could see his face, I noticed his eyes were hooded, curving slightly like crescent moons. But his pupils were so black they swallowed his iris. You don't look like you're having much fun. I swallowed hard, willing my voice to steady. I don't really do parties. It was as if the room had frozen, caught in a horrific tableau where everyone pretended to engage in conversation, yet their eyes were glued to me. Every time I glanced their way, I felt their gazes skitter away like startled insects, retreating into the shadows of their indifference. Unease festered in my stomach, a heavy knot tightening with each passing second. I tried to remain calm, forcing myself to breathe, but something strange was unfolding around me, and I could feel the world tilting, the edges of my vision blurring as lightheadedness began to creep in. No? His eyes flicked over me, lingering for a moment on my neck before returning to my face. You don't seem like the type who enjoys crowds. That obvious, huh? Very. His gaze was intense, like he was reading every thought I tried to bury. I shifted awkwardly under his scrutiny, feeling completely out of my depth. What did he want from me? Why was he even talking to me? Come with me, he said suddenly, turning and walking toward one of the side doors without waiting for a response. What? Wait. I blinked, but my feet were already moving to follow him. What the hell was I doing? I should have just stayed put, pretended I hadn't heard him. But instead, I trailed behind him like I was under some kind of spell. My heart hammered in my chest, each step taking me further away from the safety of the crowd. He led me into a smaller, dimly lit room off to the side of the ballroom. The door clicked shut behind us, and suddenly it was just me and Vincent. Alone. He turned to face me, his eyes gleaming in the low light. "I have a proposition for you." I blinked, my brain short-circuiting at the directness of his words. A proposition? What the hell did that mean? Was that what he was talking about earlier? I almost sighed in relief, and I smoothed out my expression. "Sure, $100 for the night, and I only take cash." A laugh rippled out of him, causing me to freeze. Did I misread the situation? When he said proposition, I thought, not that type of proposition. Although, given how delicious you look, I am tempted. He ran his eyes over my suit. "I have one of a more intimate nature." "Oh," I asked, but my voice cracked. "Yes, I need something from you," he continued, stepping closer. "Something only you can provide." A chill ran down my spine. This was starting to sound like the beginning of a very dangerous conversation. What could I possibly have that you'd want? You. My heart skipped a beat. Me? That didn't make any sense. He could have anyone. Anyone in that ballroom would kill for his attention, for the chance to be near him. Why me? Vincent took another step, his towering figure casting a shadow over me. His voice dropped lower, sending shivers through my body. "I need someone to be my pet for the weekend." I stared at him, completely lost. "Pet? You mean like a blood bag? A companion?" He tilted his head, eyes gleaming. "Whatever you want to call it. But there are rules." A blood bag? Now I knew this guy was off his rocker. I raised a skeptical eyebrow at him. Then again, who was I to judge? If that's what got him going, so be it. I was only there to get paid and go home. Usually, Lance dealt with the crazies, so I was surprised that someone who looked so sane had such a strange kink. But if all he wanted was for me to crawl around in a maid's outfit and bunny ears, I could definitely manage that. Rules, no kissing, and you can't fall in love with me. And he's gone off the deep end. I let out a shaky laugh, more out of disbelief than anything else. Why would I? This is insane, but yeah, sure. Whatever you say. Good. He smiled again, that same infuriating smile that said he knew exactly what he was doing. "So, we are in agreement?" He stepped closer, flashing his teeth that were way too sharp to be normal. The same uneasiness came back in full force, and my stomach flipped. Although the lights were dimmed, he looked almost ominous, otherworldly. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat. Part of me wanted to run, wanted to get the hell out of this room and away from him. But another part, a much darker part, wanted to know more. "Why would I agree to something like that?" I asked, leaning in closer. "Because you need an escape." His gaze softened slightly, just enough to make me wonder if he saw more of me than I wanted him to. "I can give you that. For one weekend, you won't have to worry about your roommate or your finances. You won't have to worry about anything. Just me." My heart raced. The thought of leaving everything behind for a weekend, even if it was with him, was tempting. So damn tempting. But it was dangerous. I wasn't stupid. I knew what kind of game Vincent was playing, and it wasn't one I was equipped for. Most of the guys Lance and I got only lasted for the night. Anything beyond that was far too risky, but I desperately needed the money, and beggars can't be choosers. "Fine," I clipped. "But I get to know where we are going, and I'll give Lance the directions in case anything happens to me." Vincent's eyes bore into mine, dark and unyielding. "Done." He ran his fingers along the lapels on my jacket. His nose inched forward, tracing along the side of my jaw, breathing in my scent. A sharp, vinegary flavor flooded my throat like red wine. "I can't wait to taste you." He nipped at my skin, and before I could respond, he turned, leaving me alone in the room with my thoughts and his dangerous proposition hanging in the air like a noose around my neck. I touched the place he nipped at, and it came away wet with blood. Chapter 2. I can't freaking believe you, Lance all but screamed at me as I packed my bag. Will you keep your voice down? I hissed at him. First, you ditch me at the party, and then you steal my boyfriend, Lance shrilled, and I hadn't the faintest idea what the hell he was screaming about. This morning, he'd barged into my room in a rage, ranting about how I'd stolen Vincent from him, the Vampire King. I rolled my eyes at his theatrics, tempted to slam the door in his face. That was our #1 rule. We don't steal each other's clients. He never mentioned anything about you being his client, I huffed in annoyance. Stop being a drama queen. He approached me, offered me a weekend away, and I accepted. If you want him so badly, then by all means, take him when I'm done. You're crazy. Lance stared at me incredulously. Do you even know who he is? He'll eat you alive. That's Vincent Nightshade. He's a vampire, I know, I mumbled, and I'm the Queen of Sheba. Anything else? Lance barked out a hideous laugh, his eyes wild. Dark circles ran a ring around his eyes, and sweat was pouring off his forehead. What the hell did he take last night? I frowned, staring at him as he stood in my doorway, his hands twitching like he was trying to restrain himself from attacking me. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into or what it means to be the vampire's pet. People would kill to have the privilege. Uh-huh, I hummed, packing my clothes. Well, if it comes with a complimentary blood bag and a shiny collar, I might reconsider. You son of a... Lance seethed, then forced himself to calm down. I saw him first. Let me go. He didn't ask for you, I eyed him. Don't you think it'll be kind of strange if I tell him I'm coming and you show up? Lance gritted his teeth, turning away. Let me come with you, please. You can't go alone. Why? Lance looked at me like I'd grown a second head and started kissing it. Just don't eat or drink anything there when you arrive, especially the blood. Promise me. Why the hell would I drink blood? I wrinkled my nose. Promise me, Lance said frantically. Please. Fine. I won't drink the blood. Now can you please stop screaming at me so I can pack my stuff? The car will be here any second. Unless you want to end up in a ditch somewhere, text me the address, Lance hissed, walking out of my room and slamming the door shut. Finally, some peace, I slumped onto the bed. Vincent had texted me the address, and apparently it was in some old Victorian mansion out in the boonies. Jesus, this guy was really sticking to his vampire facade. What next? Would he be offering me a glass of blood in a goblet while reciting poetry by candlelight? Or worse, would he expect me to don a corset and join him for a waltz under the moonlight? Okay, the corset might be hot, but everything else would be downright bizarre. Whatever. He wasn't paying me to have an opinion, and trust me, there was no shortage of those when it came to his proposition. The sun had just set over the horizon, casting my room in a warm glow. My phone buzzed with an incoming text message, and I scrambled when I realized it was Vincent's driver he sent over to pick me up. I hurried to grab my stuff. I shouted that I was leaving to Lance and hurried out the front door. My jaw dropped at the sleek black Rolls-Royce that was parked in front of my crappy apartment building. It gleamed in the light, and the driver held the door open for me. Mr. Thornfield? I nodded, my tongue welded to the roof of my mouth. Right this way. He gestured to the open door, and I quickly went in. He took my stuff and put it in the trunk, and soon we were off. A weekend with a vampire? I wanted to scoff a laugh. This Vincent guy was just another rich prick with too much money on his hands to buy pretty boys. He wasn't anything special, and I had no idea why Lance was treating him like he was the second Jesus. 30 minutes later, the car rolled to a stop in front of Vincent's mansion. I stared through the tinted window, my stomach doing flips. Sprawling, dark, and imposing, the mansion loomed like something out of a Gothic nightmare. Tall, jagged spires stabbing at the sky, shadowed stone walls thick with ivy, windows lit faintly like glowing eyes. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, expectant. Yeah, right, I wanted to scoff, but something about this mansion seemed too real. I swallowed, my hand gripping the edge of the seat like it could keep me from being sucked into whatever waited behind those heavy doors. This was it, the start of the weekend I'd somehow agreed to. I still wasn't sure why I'd said yes. Maybe it was the allure of escape. Or maybe Vincent had already sunk his claws into my mind when he'd spoken to me at the party. Whatever the reason, I am here now. There was no turning back. The driver stepped out, circled around, and opened my door. A cold gust hit me as soon as I got out, sending a shiver straight through my body. The mansion's towering silhouette seemed to darken the world around it. The closer I got, the more the massive stone doors loomed over me, like they could swallow me whole. I felt small, insignificant, against the backdrop of the ancient architecture. The doors opened with a deep, echoing creak, like they hadn't been moved in centuries. A figure stood at the entrance, tall, thin, with sharp features, and a stiff, professional air about him. His eyes slid over me, lingering on my ears, his nose wrinkling slightly in distaste. "Mr. Vincent is expecting you," the butler said, voice clipped. He turned on his heel and gestured for me to follow him inside. A butler? Really? God, this guy was too pretentious. Yet as I stepped into the mansion, I had a feeling like I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The foyer was massive. Vaulted ceilings stretched up endlessly, their edges lost in shadow. Everything was black marble and polished stone, with splashes of red from the massive tapestries hanging from the walls. It was like walking into a palace of shadows, silent and cold. The air felt thick, like it was charged with something just below the surface, something dark and dangerous. The faint scent of blood filled my nostrils, and I frowned, wondering why Vincent always seemed to be permeated in the stench. The butler led me down a long corridor. My footsteps barely made a sound against the polished floors, but I could hear the soft rustle of fabric and whispers drifting from behind closed doors. I caught glimpses of pale faces, glowing eyes peering out from the shadows of dimly lit rooms. They watched me, their gazes hungry, curious. I kept my head down, my heart racing. "Is that him?" a voice said, then a man peered out the door. I almost flinched back from his intense caramel eyes that were much too vibrant to be real. Were those contacts? Yikes. He should sue whoever he paid to get them. They looked absolutely hideous against his chalky skin. "Sydney, right?" the man continued, standing a head taller than me. "Oh, he was right. You are simply delicious. I saw you at the club last night. You won't remember me, but I certainly remember Vincent's brand new pet." He spoke so fast that it sent me into a whirlwind. Pitch black hair fell over his face like a curtain, but his smile was sharp, like the tip of a blade. "Yeah. And you are?" "Lucian," he said. "Vincent's younger and more fun coven brother. We aren't related." Pleasure to meet you." We shook hands, but he lingered a touch too long. "Why don't you join us once you're settled? You can meet the rest of the coven." Coven? Was this guy for real? Next, he'd probably introduce them as the Society of the Unholy and expect us to hold hands while chanting under a full moon. Why do I always get stuck with the crazies? I mean, did I accidentally sign up for a horror movie instead of a job? At this rate, I half expected him to hand me a ritual dagger and invite me to join their blood sacrifice. "Sure," I forced a smile. "Mr. Thornfield?" "This way." The butler clicked his tongue, and I followed. As we walked deeper into the mansion, I realized just how big this place was. The corridors seemed to twist and turn endlessly, leading us deeper into the bowels of the house. The further we went, the darker it became. Torches flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows that stretched and danced with every step. Okay, this was more than a simple fetish. I must have underestimated how much of a kink this guy had for all things vampire. After what felt like forever, we reached a set of double doors at the end of a narrow hallway. The butler pushed them open and stepped aside, motioning for me to enter. I hesitated on the threshold. Beyond the doors, the room was dim, but I could see the outline of an enormous bed draped in dark velvet and a figure standing near the window, silhouetted against the faint light of the moon. Vincent. He didn't move as I stepped inside. The doors shut behind me with a soft click that echoed in the silence. I could feel his presence in the room, filling it completely, even though he hadn't said a word. I took a breath and walked farther into the room. Vincent turned slowly, his face partially obscured by shadow. The moonlight from the window cast a pale glow over his sharp features, making him look even more inhuman than usual. His eyes gleamed in the dim light, focused entirely on me. He didn't speak right away, just stood there watching me. It was the same way he'd looked at me at the party, like he could see right through me, down to my bones. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, each beat thudding louder in the quiet room. "Welcome, Sydney," he finally said, his voice low and smooth, like velvet laced with danger. "I trust everything is to your liking." "Sure," I forced another smile. "Happy to be here." Vincent's eyes flicked down to my hands. I hadn't realized I was fidgeting, my fingers twisting nervously around the hem of my jacket. He didn't miss a thing. A small smile played at the corner of his lips, like he found my unease amusing. "Good." He moved away from the window, his steps silent as he crossed the room. "I've been looking forward to our weekend." "Me too," I said with forced enthusiasm. "So, when did you want to get started?" The faster I knew how crazy he was, the faster I could go home. "Do you need me as your blood bag right away, or should I shower first?" I assumed blood bag was just a euphemism for a BJ. If that was the case, I might as well get on my knees. He smiles ruefully. "Not yet, for now. How about we discuss the issue of payment? I have wired the money into your bank account." My jaw dropped. Did he just say wired? I was happy to do this for $100 a night, but when he said it like that, it sounded like significantly more. "Wire?" "Yes," Vincent replied. "I know you said 100 per night, but that is far too little for someone of your talents. So, I took the liberty of adding a little bit of a tip, if you don't mind." "How much are we talking?" I asked hesitantly. "Is 50,000 good for you?" I blinked, forcing back a laugh. "Oh, sure, because everyone just has that lying around." "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious." "Okay. I'll believe it when I see it," I thought, and he smirked. Thank you?" I laughed nervously. Why do I feel like I'm about to be quartered like some kind of medieval sacrifice? Is there a secret menu I don't know about? Vincent laughed, a genuine bellow that for some reason made my skin crawl. "Yes and no," Vincent replied, still chuckling. "But this is where you'll stay for the weekend." He gestured around the room, his eyes never leaving mine. "You'll be comfortable here. With me." "Oh." I glanced around. The room was grand, but it was also cold and sterile, in a way that made me feel even more out of place. The bed was massive, covered in dark, luxurious fabrics, and the windows stretched from floor to ceiling, casting silvery light across the room. But it didn't feel like somewhere I could relax. It felt like somewhere I was meant to be watched, to be kept. "So, we'll be sharing a bed?" Duh. He wanted to maximize whatever he paid for. I felt stupid for asking the question. Vincent stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "Do you remember the rules?" I nodded, though my throat tightened at the reminder. "No kissing, no falling in love," I recited. His smile widened. "Good." He reached out, his fingers grazed my cheek. The touch was cold, almost electric, and I fought the urge to pull away. His thumb brushed over the edge of my jaw, lingering there for just a moment before he withdrew his hand. "There's more to this weekend than just the rules," he said, his voice dipping lower, "but we'll get to that in time." Before I could ask what he meant, there was a soft knock on the door. Another butler, this one shorter and more muscular than the one who'd led me here, stepped inside. "Everything is ready, my lord," the butler said, his eyes glancing over to me before settling on Vincent. Vincent's expression didn't change, but I could feel a shift in the air around him. Something colder, more dangerous. "Good," Vincent said. "See to it that no one disturbs us." The butler bowed quickly and disappeared as silently as he'd come. I had the sudden, unsettling feeling that this wasn't just about me being Vincent's pet. There was something else going on here, something I didn't understand yet. Vincent turned back to me, his eyes gleaming. "Come," he said, his voice soft but commanding. He turned and led me toward a door at the far end of the room, one I hadn't noticed before. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. Whatever was waiting behind that door, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. Once inside, Vincent closed the door behind us. The room beyond was smaller and even darker. There was no bed here, no windows. Just a large ornate chair in the center of the room, surrounded by candles. The flames flickered, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. Vincent gestured toward the chair. "Sit." I hesitated for a moment before stepping forward and lowering myself into the chair. The leather was cool against my skin, and The flickering candlelight made everything feel surreal. He stood in front of me, towering over me, his eyes fixed on mine. "Do you know why you're really here, Sydney?" I blinked, confused. "I thought, this isn't just about being my pet," he interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "There's more at play here." My pulse quickened. I could feel it. Something deeper. Something dark and tangled beneath the surface of whatever this was. I just didn't know what. Vincent leaned down, his face inches from mine, his breath cold against my skin. "My coven brother wants me dead," he confessed, "and I think you're the key to stopping them." "Me? You've got to be kidding." I almost leapt out of my chair, but his strong hand wrenched me back, forcing me to sit. "Yes, you," Vincent replied easily. "I need you to watch him and do as I say. Will you promise me that?" "Why the hell would I do that? I was only here for the weekend." I choked on my words. Was he a part of the mafia? Oh God, did I get abducted by the mafia? I won't do anything illegal, I lashed out, my heart racing. "I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to watch him, see what he says, and what he does. Nothing more or less. Our agreement is still on. I still expect you to act like my pet. In the meantime, you must do this for me." Again, why? Vincent stared deep into my eyes. "Because I know where your mother is." The words snatched the breath from my lungs. My mother? How long has it been since she went missing? Why did he know where she was, when I had spent years trying to find her? So long that she was presumed dead. None of this was making any sense, and a wave of dizziness swept over me. "My mother? You know where my mother is?" "Yes, Sydney Thornfield," Vincent said my name, his voice sounding like honey. My mind raced. None of this made sense. I was supposed to be here for one weekend. A blood bag, nothing more. But this was something far more dangerous. Vincent straightened, his eyes still locked on mine. He traced a long finger over my chin, his sharp nail almost digging in. When did they become so long? "You'll help me, won't you, Sydney?" he purred. His expression twisted into something almost demonic, and shadows seemed to creep and crawl around him, shifting restlessly, while he remained completely still. Was it just an illusion? I swallowed, my throat tight. I didn't have a choice. I nodded. Chapter 3. The next evening, I woke up to cold sheets and the eerie silence that filled the mansion. The memory of the night before felt heavy on my chest. Vincent's cryptic words, the chilling weight of his gaze. God, this was crazy. As I sat up, the room around me seemed even larger, emptier, like the walls were pressing in on me, reminding me that I didn't belong there. I glanced toward the window, but heavy drapes blocked out the fading sunlight. Or what would have been sunlight? I had no idea what time it was. It felt like I'd been sucked into a world where time didn't exist. The mention of my mother had jarred me, thrown me completely off kilter because I believed him. Vincent knew my mother, or at least what had happened to her. My throat constricted and I gripped the blankets until my knuckles were white. The door creaked open. I jumped slightly, my heart skipping a beat. It was a servant this time, different from the ones I'd seen before. She was tall and gaunt, her dark eyes avoiding mine as she carried a silver tray into the room. Without a word, she set it down on the table near the bed, the scent of freshly brewed coffee curling through the air. "Breakfast?" she said in a clipped voice, still not meeting my gaze. She didn't wait for a response before she turned on her heel and disappeared back through the door. I stared at the tray for a long moment, my stomach churning. Coffee, pastries, and fruit. The kind of breakfast you'd expect at a five-star hotel. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all wrong. The food sat there, pristine and untouched, like an offering in some ancient ritual I didn't understand. Lance had told me not to eat anything here, but my stomach gave off a pitiful rumble. Pulling the sheets off, I stood up, stretching. I moved to the table, but I didn't touch the food. Instead, I leaned against the window frame, staring at the dark drapes that kept the outside world at bay. My coven brother wants me dead, Vincent had said. What did he mean? Why would his brother want to kill him? And what did it have to do with my mother? I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. I wasn't a detective, and I certainly didn't belong in the twisted world of rich people's politics. The door creaked open again. I turned, expecting another servant, but it was Vincent this time. He entered the room with the same silent grace he always had, his eyes locking onto mine the moment he stepped inside. His presence filled the room instantly, making the air feel thick and charged. "You didn't eat," he said, his voice smooth but with an edge of something darker. He walked over to the tray, his fingers lightly brushing the edge of one of the cups. "Nervous?" I crossed my arms, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened. "I'm not hungry." Vincent's eyes flicked up to meet mine. There was a moment of silence, the tension between us crackling like static in the air. He moved closer, his steps slow and deliberate, until he was standing right in front of me. His fingers grazed my chin, lifting my face toward his. The touch was cold, but not unpleasant. It sent a shiver down my spine. "You should eat," he murmured, his voice low, almost coaxing. "You'll need your strength." My mouth went dry. "For what?" "For what's to come," he said, his thumb brushing over my jaw before he let go and stepped back. He turned toward the door, pausing for just a moment before glancing over his shoulder. "Get dressed. I'll show you the grounds." I stared at his retreating figure, my heart pounding. The room felt hollow without him. I dressed quickly, pulling on a dark sweater and jeans. Vincent was already there, stepping into the corridor, his eyes briefly scanning me before he nodded and started walking. His long strides made it hard to keep up. We headed toward the garden, a Victorian maze sprawling before me. I balked at the sheer size of the mansion, the grounds littered with towering granite statues, gargoyles and demons, their wings outstretched, watching me from the shadows. My heart raced. What kind of place was this? I felt eyes burning a hole through my skin, and when I looked up, I realized it was Lucian and a few of his friends, lounging on a daybed underneath a gazebo. They all looked impossibly beautiful, laughing and fluttering around in the now fading sunlight. But I felt their gaze on me, like a blade against my skin. "Who are they?" I asked, trying to distract myself. "Lucian's friends," Vincent clipped. "Why are they here?" I wondered aloud. "The coven is always bustling," Vincent replied, and I rolled my eyes at his language. "Coven? Really?" God, this was so crazy. I didn't know whether to go along with it or start screaming. "You mentioned my mother," I probed. "How do you know her?" "Straight to the point." "I like that," Vincent replied, his mouth curling. "If I tell you, you won't believe me. It's better if I show you." "Show me," I scoffed. Was this all some stupid goddamn game to him? My mother has been missing for years, since I was a kid, and the way he spoke so casually about it was like a knife to my freaking chest. "Look, if you're playing games with me, then why would I do that?" Vincent cut me off. "Then tell me where she is and how you know her," I snapped. Vincent regarded me but didn't slow his strides. "I met her 200 years ago." "Right. Forget I asked," I barked, striding faster and faster away from him. What the hell was this guy playing at? Was this some kind of sick joke? My stomach turned and I flinched when cold hands wrapped around my wrist, forcing me to stop. "I'm not toying with you," Vincent spoke in a low voice. "You will know the truth soon. Trust me." "Trust you? The guy who thinks he's some kind of vampire king? What Kool-Aid are you drinking? Hell, what is everyone else smoking? Whatever it is, I need some of it." I flung my hands into the air. Vincent chuckled. "Soon. Come, pet, I have much to show you." He picked up the pace, and I hurried after him as we headed toward the cemetery, which was even more disturbing than the gardens. Tombstones rose like jagged teeth from the earth, shrouded by twisted trees. This has to be some joke. There's no way this is real. We stopped in front of a massive stone mausoleum, its iron door looming before us, creaking open as if summoned. Vincent stood near a soapstone coffin, staring at the inscription. "This was my maker, Dorian. He died 200 years ago, and he was the one who made your mother." "Oh, God," I rolled my eyes. "Great. Let me guess. He also invented flying cars and the concept of brunch while he was at it?" "Something like that," Vincent's mouth twitched. But I'm sure he would have been infamous for inventing the concept of brunch. Wonderful. Any more crazy stories you want to add while you're at it? I gritted out. Why was I wasting my time? This man was insane. He even wore a three-piece suit on a stroll through his gardens. I mean, who does that? I took a deep breath through my nose. Don't talk. Let him spew his nonsense. I'll finish the rest of the weekend and go home. Only one more day left. I'm afraid things won't be that simple, Vincent replied, almost like he was responding to my thoughts. Come, I will show you now. I arched an imperious brow at him. Fine. Show me. May I? He held out his hand. I huffed and slapped mine in his, noticing how cold it was, and it sent a chill down my spine. Vincent stepped closer, pulling me toward his chest, forcing me to stare deep into his blackened eyes, two swirling pits. It'll hurt. The memories, the fangs. Do you consent? This was crazy. Sure, I consent, I muttered, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. Vincent's eyes held a giddy gleam, and he turned me around so that my back was against his firm chest. He whispered something in Romanian, and my breath stuttered out of me when I realized I recognized the language. Strange, I'd never even left Philly. It must have been something I picked up from a movie. My gaze flickered up to a small mirror on the wall, and suddenly my vision fractured when I realized that I was the only one there. Even though Vincent was behind me, he had no reflection. What the hell? I flinched when his chest rumbled, sounding almost guttural in the mausoleum. I looked over my shoulder, just in time to see his teeth bare, and that is when I noticed that there was something seriously wrong. Two very long, razor-sharp teeth, nearly 1.5 inches, slid out of Vincent's gums. Oh my God. I panicked and reached out blindly to punch whatever I could reach. Vincent's hand shot out to grip my wrist, his grip like iron, twisting it around my back and holding me in place. I thrashed, my heart pumping, a scream rolling up my throat. My whole body broke out into a cold sweat. My heart thundered in my ears, and like a caged animal, I tried hitting everything. His teeth pierced my skin. I choked on a scream, the fangs inched so deep, my knees buckled. What the hell was happening right now? Vincent sucked. His mouth drew blood with a primal urgency that sent shockwaves through my body. Panic surged, adrenaline flooding my veins as I fought to comprehend the surreal horror unfolding. Darkness crept into my vision, but something in his gaze held me captive. The world around me blurred, and all I could focus on was him. The overwhelming need clawing at me even as fear tightened its grip. My shaft filled with need pulsating in my jeans. Oh God. My eyes rolled back into my head as desire licked through my core. Then images flashed and strobed in my mind, pictures of things and places I couldn't comprehend. My mother, forever young, smiled as a man who looked like my father stood beside her. Flames roared as Dorian threw her into the fire, but not before she made Vincent promise to take care of her son. I saw his horror at being turned, his abject fear of eternal life. Every emotion he felt bled into me, sang inside my veins, intertwining our fates. I saw Vincent killing Dorian, revenge for my mother for breaking the Coven's rule about mating with humans. Then there was me, as a child, as a teen, as an adult. Vincent watched from the shadows, waiting, guiding me through high school, paying for our home and hiring a foster family to care for me. 20 long years he waited for his fated one for this moment, to drink from his destined mate. A wave of shock blasted through me, and I clawed at him, desperate to escape. I thrashed and yanked, but my struggles were weak against his strength. I wasn't just his blood bag, I was his life source. I was his fated mate. Then the darkness surged up and devoured me whole. A scream welled up in my throat as I jerked awake, scrambling on the bed, my feet getting caught and tangled in the sheets. Where am I? What happened? I was breathing hard, my vision darkening at the edges. Relax, you're safe, Vincent replied, but he looked utterly wrecked. His dark brown hair was escaping the confines of the gel, curling over his brow. His face, however, looked ashen. I should have. His jaw worked. I got too carried away. Stay away from me, I thundered, staggering off the bed. I needed to get the hell out of here. I backed into the wall, staring at the monster who sat on my bed, his shoulders slumped. What the hell was this place? I touched my neck, my fingers clawing at the skin to touch where he'd bitten me, and I winced when the place came away swollen and wet with blood. Jesus! This guy had freaking assaulted me. I needed to call the police and get out right now. You stay back or I'll scream, Vincent sighed. I'm sorry I scared you. I thought you might be ready and I got too impatient. Impatient? I laughed incredulously. You tried to take a chunk out of my neck like I was the last slice of cake at a party. Well, you do taste just as sweet. This is over. I'm done, okay? Take me home now, I bellowed at him. Vincent sighed and got off the bed. I'm sorry, I can't do that. My brain must have malfunctioned because I think he was telling me no. You what? You promised to stay until the weekend is done, which is one more day, Vincent replied. I'm sorry, but it's not safe. And until we can kill my brother, you'll need to remain here. Kill your brother? I sputtered incredulously. This guy was certifiable. First, he wanted my help with trying to find out why his brother was trying to kill him. And now, he wanted me to commit straight-up murder? Okay, pal, I can't compete with this level of crazy. So why don't you let me go and we can let bygones be bygones? I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I don't want to remain here, I hissed. I haven't lied to you, Vincent cut me off. I've been honest every step of the way. You said you wanted to know. You consented, and I'm sorry it scared you, Sydney, but He huffed, almost impatient with himself. I need you here, with me, please. Why? What? Vincent balked. Why do you need me here? I inched closer to the door. I saw your memories, your feelings. You've been watching me, stalking me. The breath shuddered out of me. Haven't you? Yes, I won't deny it, Vincent replied. I've been tasked with taking care of you. Katrina meant the world to me, and don't speak her name. My nostrils flared as rage bristled in my core. You didn't know her. This isn't real. None of this is real. I can assure you, Sydney, it's very real. Vincent stepped forward. I'll give you some time to process this, but I've been waiting for you for a long time. I won't hurt you, I promise. My throat constricted as he walked out of the room, and I slumped against the wall. However, I jolted when the latch clicked shut. Bastard! My hand curled into a fist, and I wished to God I had listened to Lance for once. I raced over to my dresser and picked up my phone, noticing I had several missed calls and text messages from Lance. Are you dead yet? Don't make me come over there, ho. Now I know his D isn't that good that you can't pick up your phone for 48 hours. Okay, now you're scaring me. Should I file a missing persons report? Then, there were no more because I had no signal. I couldn't send a message to him or anyone else. Freaking hell. I stamped down the fury bubbling up inside me and slid down the wall until my backside thumped against the cold, hard floor. A laugh rattled out of me, but the numbness stayed, and I ran a hand through my hair, bracing myself for a long, endless night. Stuck with this madman who, after several hours, had me questioning my own sanity and wondering if, just maybe, he really was the Vampire King. Chapter 4. I twisted and turned in the bed, sheets tangling around my legs as I thrashed. Sweat dripped down my forehead, soaking into the pillow. The dreams came in flashes, too vivid, too real to escape. My mother's soft lips pressed against my forehead, her angelic face hovering over me. Her warmth was intoxicating like I was being wrapped in sunlight. Then came my father, his strong arms holding me close, his heartbeat steady, grounding. But just as quickly, everything changed. Flames. The fire that set our apartment ablaze roared in my ears, consuming everything. My father's grip tightened around me, trying to shield me, but the heat was unbearable. The crackling of wood and the suffocating smoke filled my nostrils, its arsenic scent burning my lungs. My mother's face, once so soft and gentle, was gone, lost in the chaos. She went missing, presumed dead. The thick black smoke overwhelmed me. The air became impossible to breathe, and bile surged in my stomach as the room swirled. My body jerked violently, wrenching out of sleep with a loud gasp. The sky was dark, nighttime again. which seemed so bizarre because I kept sleeping through the days here, so it was almost impossible to tell what time it was. Running a hand through my hair, I sighed and flinched when movement caught in my peripherals. Perched like a gargoyle on the corner of my bed, Vincent's glowing eyes bore into me with an unnatural hunger, the faint glimmer in them enough to make my skin crawl. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, breathless. "Sorry," Vincent replied, his voice smooth like aged wine. "I thought you might be hungry since you didn't eat anything all day." As if on cue, my stomach rumbled. I was starving, but Lance's warning blared in my head. Don't eat the food, don't drink his blood. Even if I did, how could I be worse off than I am right now? Sighing, I got off the bed and stretched. Fine. Vincent rose, but he moved with such elegance it almost looked like he was floating. Follow me. Shadows stretched across the walls as we made our way down the stairs, each step echoing in the vast, hollow space around us. We reached the dining room, and my jaw dropped as my gaze fell on the table. It was an impressive spread of food, lavish, decadent, and overwhelming. Platters of fruit, meats, and desserts were laid out like an offering, but that wasn't what stole my breath. They were there, sitting around the table. Other vampires. They sat unnervingly still, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. Every single one of them had the same caramel eyes as Lucian, but some were tinged with pale blue or sharp, icy green. Their fingers curled around their glasses, each ending in sharp, claw-like nails that caught the light in a way that made my stomach tighten. Vampires. The word whispered in my mind like a secret, chilling me to the bone. I could feel their gazes boring into me, analyzing, assessing. I swallowed hard, the unease creeping up my spine as I followed Vincent's lead to the head of the table. He gestured for me to sit beside him. The air was thick with tension as I took my place, trying to avoid eye contact with the others. At the far end of the table sat Lucian, his smirk as sharp as his fangs. He raised his champagne glass in a mock salute, the movement almost taunting. "Welcome," he said. Although he was at the end of the table, I felt like his voice was right beside me. I could only stare, my hands clenching the edge of my seat, feeling like prey, surrounded by a pack of wolves. The servants brought a delicious spread of cured meats, cheese, olives, chicken, potatoes, steaks, all the food one could find delicious. However, my stomach was roiling. I noticed each cup was filled with a dark liquid that was too thick to be wine, but my mind wouldn't allow me to believe it was anything else. Vincent watched me with a barely concealed giddiness, and it struck me then. I hadn't eaten anything in almost 2 days, not since I arrived here. As my brother was saying, "Welcome to the Crimson Sanctum," Vincent stood, raising his glass, "to my first and only human pet." "To the pets!" the vampires echoed, and I felt sick. What is this? I shivered and raised my glass too. I didn't drink it and set it back down, my fingers twisting in the napkin on my lap. Vincent sat down and turned to me. "You aren't eating?" "I'm not hungry." "Don't lie to me," Vincent replied smoothly. "The number one thing you'll learn about me is that I don't like people who lie to me." I gulped, not sure if I wanted to risk it. "I won't hurt you. Eat." "Please," Vincent urged, and something within me felt like he was telling me the truth. "Fine." I took a bite and the flavor exploded on my tongue. I took another, then another, delirious from the taste of the food. Damn, it was so freaking good. Vincent filled my wine glass and I drank greedily from it, almost moaning from the taste. Conversations erupted around me, but I was so immersed in eating that I barely noticed that they weren't actually speaking to each other and that their gazes tracked my movements. "So," Vincent steepled his hands and sat back in his gilded chair, "you have questions?" "Sure," I said around a mouthful of food. "How did you become the Vampire King?" Vincent chuckled. "I see you no longer think this isn't real, or that it's a game." "Well, I figured it's either that or I've gone crazy, you know? Mental breakdown and all that jazz." "Of course," Vincent smiled thinly. "Dorian, my maker, named me King before his ultimate demise." "Oh, that's not the real story," Lucian cut in, laughing. "Don't dance around it, brother. Tell him the real story." He stood up from his chair and glided over to us. I stiffened when his hand landed on the back of my chair, his sharp nails tracing the fabric of my t-shirt. Dorian was 5,000 years old. Tell me, Sydney, have you ever seen a vampire burn? It's not pretty. At first, they sizzle, like bacon on the grill, their skin bubbling and sparking, the grease spattering. The skin turns from pink to black around the edges, and then there are the screams. Dorian screamed for hours, days. Didn't he, brother? While you stood by and watched? See, that's the only way a vampire can become king. He has to kill his maker. I see. Thank you for that vivid description, I replied dryly. You are so very welcome, Sydney. You look so familiar, but I can't seem to place your face. Lucian, Vincent clipped. Why don't you let Sydney get back to his meal? Of course, Your Highness. Lucian gave a mock bow before heading back to his seat. So, you killed him? Good to know, I replied. Yes, but it isn't what you think, Vincent said. I know, I drank some more wine. I saw it in your memories. You hated him, and he hated you. It seems he only turned you because you looked pretty. Yes. Dorian had an affinity for beauty. I always think he thought of me as more of a puppet than an actual person. He smiled ruefully. What else would you like to know? What are you going to do with me? Vincent froze, as did the rest of the dining room table. I held my ground, though, my stomach nodding at the prospect of being put to death in a place like this, slaughtered just because I saw too much, because I knew too much. I reiterate what I said earlier, Vincent replied. I won't hurt you. I turned back to my food and asked no more questions after that. Vincent led me silently down a long corridor, his footsteps soft against the polished floor. My heart was still hammering in my chest, but I stayed quiet, too freaked out to even form words. The mansion felt endless, room after room, hallway after hallway, each one more lavish than the last. I had no idea where we were headed, and at this point, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. We finally stopped at the entrance of a room, and when I stepped inside, my breath caught in my throat. It was a Victorian-style library, its dark wooden shelves towering up to the ceiling, filled with row upon row of books. The dim light from the chandelier above cast a soft glow on the polished oak floors. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, giving the room an almost dreamlike quality. Wow, I whispered, taking in the endless collection. It was the kind of place you could get lost in for hours, if you weren't so freaked out by the fact that you were touring it with a vampire. I hope you will enjoy your time here, Sydney, Vincent said from behind me, his voice low, almost as if he expected me to come back. There was a hint of something in his tone, like he was laying down a challenge. Welp, I wasn't going to touch that can of worms. My plan once I got out of this place was to run so far, so fast, my figure would blur, and if I made it out alive, I'd be ghosting this place, literally. As I turned to leave, something on the wall caught my eye, an oil painting. My legs stopped moving, and a wave of disbelief crashed over me. My breath left my lungs in a sharp, shocked gasp. It was my mother. Dressed in an 18th century teal gown, her face was serene, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo. I stumbled closer, eyes wide, my heart pounding in my ears. There was no mistaking it. That was her exact face, frozen in time. Impossible, I muttered under my breath, unable to tear my eyes from the painting. My mother's face, captured in such perfect detail, stared back at me like a ghost. No. Vincent's voice drifted toward me, low and steady. It is possible. He stepped closer, his presence chilling. That's her. I turned to face him, rage bubbling up from the pit of my stomach. Why did you bring me here? To torture me? My voice shook with anger, my nostrils flaring as I spat the words. I was hanging on by a thread, and he was pulling it. No, Sydney, he said, his tone oddly gentle. I brought you here because I want you to know the truth. Which is? My voice cracked, and I felt like I was teetering on the edge of madness. The sheer absurdity of everything crashed over me like a tidal wave. The mansion, the vampires, the painting. It was too much. My head spun, and for a moment, I thought I might just start screaming and never stop. Vincent's gaze softened, but his words hit me like a hammer. "You are half vampire," he said slowly, deliberately, as though he were explaining something simple. "Don't you remember?" My vision blurred with a red haze, and suddenly, memories I had buried deep within surged to the surface. I was back in my foster family's home, yanking a frozen steak from the freezer. I could see myself tearing into the plastic, blood seeping from the styrofoam thick and dark. I had been so hungry, so desperate. And then, the visitor in the night. Someone had come, someone who had given me exactly what I needed to quench that unholy thirst. "You," I gasped, the horror gripping me like a vice. "You've been feeding me your blood?" "Yes." Vincent's voice was calm, unbothered by the accusation. He stepped closer, his body looming over mine, crowding my space until I felt trapped. "You need it. Even now, this food alone won't satisfy you. You need me, Sydney. Let me take away the thirst." His offer, spoken so smoothly, slithered into my mind like poison. I recoiled, stumbling backward as if he'd physically struck me. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and I felt like I was going to be sick. Everything in me screamed to get away, but I couldn't move. Not when the truth was crashing down around me in waves. "I don't need you," I hissed, but it was a lie, and we both knew it. Vincent grabbed my wrist, yanking me to his chest. "You do, my pet. You need me as I need you. Drink. My veins are ready for you, prepared for you." Horror grabbed me by the throat, and the itch in my teeth came back in full force. I tried to jerk away, but his grip was like iron, and the second he brought his veiny wrist up to my nose, my nostrils flared. Heat licked down my spine, and I grabbed his arm. Horror seized me, tightening its icy grip around my throat. The sharp itch in my teeth returned with a vengeance, a gnawing hunger I couldn't control. I tried to pull away, but Vincent's grip was iron, unyielding. His veiny wrist hovered near my face, the scent of his blood overpowering my senses. My nostrils flared, heat racing down my spine like wildfire. My hand moved of its own accord, grabbing his arm as if it were my last lifeline. I felt them before I saw them. My fangs, sharp and alien, sliding from my gums with a slow, painful throb. A cold rush of fear slammed through me as I watched, horrified, as the need overtook me. The hunger became unbearable. Then I gave in. I bit down, sinking my teeth deep into his wrist, and liquid warmth exploded into my mouth. The taste. It was like nothing I had ever known. Sweet, intoxicating, pure ecstasy. I moaned, the sound escaping me unbidden as the blood rushed in, filling me, flooding me. My eyes rolled back in my head, my pulse drumming in sync with the surge of life I was drawing from him. It was better than food, better than water, better than anything I had ever craved in my entire life. The world fell away, and all that mattered was this overwhelming primal satisfaction that consumed me. I needed it, more than I had ever needed anything. "Shh, I've got you." Vincent cradled my head, and I didn't realize I'd been sobbing until the noise tore from my throat. "Shh, that's enough, love. That's enough." I pulled off his wrist, and Vincent quickly sealed the wound. I took a staggering step back, my entire body singing with pain and relief. The ache in my chest bled away, and the hunger that had made me ravenous the past couple of days disappeared. All my life, Vincent had been feeding me. The realization was like a punch to my gut. Yet my rational mind would not believe it. This had to be some kind of trick. "Did you do this to Lance?" I demanded, wiping the blood away from my chin. "Trick him? Get him addicted to your blood?" Vincent smiled thinly. "I fed him once. It was a mistake. Humans can easily become addicted. I did it to be near you, to be close to you." The breath shuddered out of me. "What do you mean?" "I told you before, you are my fated one, my destined companion, my twin beating heart. We are to walk eternity together." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. Vincent released a patient sigh. "Okay, too much for one day. Why don't you return to your room? You said I could leave, I sputtered. It's been 2 days. You said I could leave. Technically, I said the weekend, and yes, it is Sunday, but this is a long weekend. Or have you forgotten? I desperately wanted to wring his neck. A long weekend? Jesus, what next? Would he ask me to wear a leash and call him master? Crawl on the floor and bark like a dog? I wouldn't go that far, Vincent chuckled. How did he do that? Get inside my head? I backed away from him, needing the space between us. Why is Lucian trying to kill you? Because of you, Vincent said bluntly. He thinks you weaken me. He's of the belief that humans and vampires cannot be mates, same as Dorian. It was the same law that killed your mother. I would have never contacted you. It's because your life is in danger that I had to reach out to you. So you would have been content to watch me from the shadows? Undoubtedly, Vincent said with pure conviction. Just being close to your pet is enough. Raking my hands over my face, I resisted the urge to claw my eyes out. Okay, this was real. I was part vampire. I could handle it. I'd like to return to my room now. Sure, of course, Vincent said and opened the door. I kept a few paces behind him, trying not to stare at the firm lines in his back or his wide shoulder blades. This man was a work of art, and it was a shame he was absolutely insane. Or else I might have been tempted. He led me to my door and bid me good night. I headed straight for the showers, stripping off my blood-soaked clothes, ignoring the tingling feeling from Vincent's blood that spread from my wrist right down to my toes. Chapter 5. I woke up the next morning just before sunset. There had to be some kind of spell cast over the mansion. What else could explain why my body shut down and snapped awake like clockwork, right before dusk? The alternative was too wild to accept, at least out loud. The fact that I might actually be half vampire. A full-body shudder racked my body, and it had nothing to do with the draft coming through the windows. Rolling out of bed, I stretched for a minute and then showered and dressed in a black button-up and dark blue jeans, making sure to put a little product in my hair. Something was buzzing in my veins tonight, but I had no idea what it was. Opening the dual wooden doors, I walked out and almost jumped when I saw Lucian there, leaning up against the wall waiting for me. "You're awake," he beamed. "You didn't come to visit me like I asked, so I thought I'd come fetch you." Sorry about that, Vincent. Lucian's laugh grated at my nerves, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were cold and flinty, the kind that held secrets you didn't want to know. "I know my brother can be particularly persuasive," he said, his smile tight. "Come, the entertainment is just beginning." He led me to a small lounge where people I vaguely recognized from dinner were mingling. They were dressed in sharp black suits and glittering red sequin cocktail dresses like they were preparing for some high-end gala. Lucian's hand found the small of my back, steering me around the room with practiced ease. A glass of champagne appeared in my hand before I could protest. "Sydney, this is Cece, Mimi, and KK," Lucian introduced, his voice smooth. "Ladies, meet Sydney, Vincent's brand new pet." "Please don't call me that," I said with a nervous laugh, extending my hand. "I'm just Sydney." The women, Cece or Mimi, I honestly couldn't tell, burst into high-pitched laughter. "He looks absolutely delicious. So much meat on him, Lucian. You must be positively jealous," one of them said, eyeing me like I was a prime cut of steak. "I am," Lucian chuckled, though his smile made my stomach twist into knots. I don't know how my brothers managed to keep this one from me for so long. The laughter echoed around me, but all I could hear was Lucian's next words. "Come, let's bring in the others. Sydney, not Vincent's pet. Dinner is just beginning." His smile made my insides shrivel. I stiffened, my grip tightening on the champagne glass as a new group of people were led into the room. My heart sank at the sight of them. They were dressed in absurd costumes, women in maid outfits that were 2 sizes too small, skirts barely covering them, while the men were shirtless, sporting nothing but black slacks, bow ties, and tiny top hats. It was like a parody of some twisted high society masquerade. Lucian herded them into the center of the room with a wolfish grin, and the vampires began to circle, their movements predatory. eyes gleaming with a hunger that set my teeth on edge. What the hell is this? My unease spiked as Lucian stepped forward, holding out his hand to beckon one of the maids forward. His voice was smooth, almost too casual, as he asked, "Are you all prepared for the hunt?" A soft whimper broke the tension in the air, and my stomach twisted at the sound. I hadn't noticed it before, but now, as I stared, I realized that every single one of them, maids and men alike, kept their heads bowed, their eyes glued to the floor. Silent tears trailed down their cheeks, streaking their makeup. It was the kind of raw fear that made the air thick, heavy. What the hell is going on? Let the hunt begin. Lucian's voice rang out like a command, sharp and full of anticipation. The tension shattered like glass, and my blood ran cold as the vampires leaped forward. The people in maid costumes jumped up, frantic, clawing at the doors in a desperate attempt to escape. But it was useless. Lucian was on them in an instant, faster than my eyes could follow, and with a sickening rip, he tore out a chunk of one man's throat. Blood sprayed, painting the room in crimson streaks. "No!" I screamed, the sound raw in my throat as I stumbled forward, scrambling to help the nearest person. My hands reached out for a woman who was sobbing, her hands trembling as she tried to flee. But before I could even touch her, she was dragged back into the fray by one of the vampires. Her scream cut off abruptly as fangs sank deep into her neck, her body jerking violently before going limp. Oh, God, no. I spun around, heart pounding in my chest, looking for any way to stop the carnage. But everywhere I turned, the monsters were ripping into flesh, shredding people apart as if they were nothing but prey. Blood pooled on the floor, thick and dark, as the vampires gorged themselves. One of the shirtless men in a bow tie stumbled toward me, blood streaming down his face from a gash on his forehead. I reached for him, but a blur of movement knocked him out of my reach. He was dragged away, his screams piercing the air as they tore into him. My body moved on instinct, trying to pull someone, anyone, from the nightmare. But they were too strong, too fast, and too many. The room was a slaughterhouse, and I was helpless in the middle of it. Enough! Vincent's voice pierced the room like a wail, and my knees almost buckled. All the other vampires cowardly hissed, clutching at their ears as Vincent came into the room. A wave of miasma blasted through the room, sending several of them flying back. Then Vincent appeared. His eyes were blazing red, his face twisted in a demonic expression that was enough to make my soul leave my body. It was monstrous. His eyes drooped, his fangs elongated like daggers. The skin around his face became wrinkled and deformed-looking, almost bat-like. Jesus Christ. I clung to the wall, breathing heavily. What? Lucian laughed, his mouth bloodied. We were just having some fun. Fun? Vincent bellowed. With my mate nearby? Have you lost your mind? See? You're no fun, Lucian pouted. I didn't show him anything he wouldn't have seen already. Shut up and get out! Vincent roared. The vampires hissed like feral cats, but most of them bolted from the room. Lucian was the only one who remained, his eyes lit with vengeance. You've ruined my party. Is this what our maker raised you to be? Vincent snarled. To kill so indiscriminately. They won't be missed, I assure you. Lucian flicked his wrist, his expression bored. Lucian, Vincent seethed, get out of my sight. The gaze Lucian leveled him with could only be described as murderous, but he waltzed out of the room and closed the door behind him. I couldn't stand in this room a second longer. I sprinted for the door, but Vincent caught me. Please, I'm sorry you had to see that. What is this? Why did you allow this to happen? Allow him to kill so many people? This is how he's always been, Vincent replied. I'm sorry you had to see this. How long does this happen? I demanded. Every night, Vincent confessed. You don't understand. We need to feed unless we have a fated one. Right. How could I forget? For you, that's me, right? So you've been feeding on me every night since I was a child. Vincent flinched, like he'd been slapped. Not exactly, but yes. You needed to feed on me as well, and I waited until you were old enough. You're just like him, I said, my nostrils flaring. What's the difference between the vampire king and his prince? Vincent's eyes flashed. The difference is the sheer chaos and destruction Lucian will leave in his wake. The difference is sacrificing all of humanity. You say that, but how can I be sure? How can I know for sure you're telling the truth? Have I lied to you yet? Vincent hissed at me. Fine, I'll show you. He grabbed my bicep, practically dragging me out the door. Vincent led me down the long corridor, the flickering torchlight casting eerie shadows that danced along the cold stone walls. His grip on my arm was unyielding, ironclad. No matter how much I struggled, it was useless. He was stronger, faster. My heart pounded in my chest as the smell hit me. Rot. Decay. It twisted in my nostrils, curling into my gut like a venomous snake. My stomach churned and I nearly gagged. This is why, Vincent murmured, stopping in front of a massive, rusted door. He threw it open and I stumbled inside. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat as my eyes fell on the piles of bodies strewn across the dungeon floor. Some of the corpses were stacked high, nearly reaching the ceiling, limbs twisted in a grotesque, tangled mess. Their faces were frozen in horror, mouths open in silent screams, and their skin was pale, drained, their bodies nothing but husks. But the worst part, the puncture wounds, all of them. The unmistakable marks of fangs, as if they'd been fed on over and over. What is this? I whispered, horrified, unable to tear my eyes away. Lucien's grand plan, Vincent replied, his voice cold. The one I've been trying to stop. Plan? I turned to him, bile rising in my throat. He did this. He drinks the blood of the dead, Vincent said, disgust thick in his voice. It's poison to us. It drives us mad. But Lucien, he's addicted to it, reasoning we don't need living humans anymore. He refuses to burn the bodies, so they've piled up. He believes this is our future. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. How do you stop him? Vincent's eyes flickered, something dark and dangerous in them. The only way I know how? You have to kill him. Yes, he said grimly, and he knows it. That's why he went after you. You're my weakness, my pet. He'll kill you to destroy me. My chest tightened, dread curling inside me. How do we beat him? Vincent met my gaze. Fire. It's the only thing that can destroy him. It dawned on me. This was why he asked me to come here. You want me to do it? Lucien sleeps during the day. I need you to set fire to his coffin, Vincent said like it was the easiest thing in the world. I was so furious I laughed. So you brought me here to kill your brother? And let me guess, you won't stop with him either? You want those other vampires dead too? Yes. God, you're sick. If there was any other way, don't you think I would have done it by now? Vincent demanded. Really? Because I can think of hundreds of ways. Thousands of ways you could have killed him without getting me involved, I hissed at him. If you really are vampires, how do you know he doesn't know what you're plotting right now? That he can't hear us shouting at each other? The walls are soundproof. And like I told you, he already knows, Vincent said easily. The reason it's you is because Lucien won't sense you. You're half vampire. My eyes narrowed. I'm half human too. But you have no scent to us, not the way humans do. He won't scent you, and it's exactly what I need. Please, only you can put a stop to this. I snorted. No, I can't be the one to. You can't ask me to. Sydney, Vincent's Adam's apple bobbed. Many will die senselessly if you don't. Please. You must. I gritted my teeth. I knew he was right. Too many had died already. I can't. I've never killed anyone. Please, do it for me. For us, for them, Vincent begged. Do it because... He swallowed, then stepped forward, crowding my space. Do it because you love me. He touched my arm and sparks flew. I jerked away from him, but he kept coming closer. I know the innermost parts of you. I've watched after you. I've kept you safe. I've loved you from afar for so many years, Sydney. You are mine, my pet, my fated mate. Shut up, I hissed at him, but he backed me into the nearest wall. You manipulated me. You fed me your blood so that I would be bonded to you. Yes, everything, yes, you are mine. You're insane, I whispered frantically, utterly insane. And yours. Vincent was breathing hard, and we were chest to chest. My gaze flickered down to his lips, and I forced myself to look away, the heat between us almost smoldering. We strike tonight. Tonight? I shoved him off, and Vincent let me. I stormed out of the dungeon, my heart pounding in my chest, my lungs burning with each ragged breath. He didn't fight me, he just let me go, his eyes shadowed with something unreadable. I didn't care. I needed to be alone. I made it to my room, slamming the door behind me. The walls seemed to close in, and I paced the floor, my hands running through my hair. My mind was spinning, memories flashing in my brain like strobe lights, flashes of my childhood, of days that never made sense until now. Days when I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. Vincent had always been there. A tidal wave of images crashed over me. I saw myself as a kid, crying after a horrible day at school, bullies laughing at me, and there in the corner of the room, a shadow, looming, watching. Vincent. More memories came, faster now. The faces of those bullies at school suddenly scared, their eyes darting away from me like I had become something monstrous. I remembered the asshole manager at my old job. He just disappeared one day. No explanation. No one knew where he went, but I know now. For over 20 years, Vincent had been there, beside me in the shadows. When I had my first John, crying my way through it, the shame burning me alive, Vincent had watched, always watching. The loneliness crushed me, filling my chest like a suffocating weight. I thought I'd had no one, but he had been there, manipulating my life, my choices, guiding me. My head throbbed like it was splitting open under the flood of memories. I wanted to scream, to claw them out of my mind. I sank to the floor, gasping, when suddenly strong arms wrapped around me. I jolted, but those arms held me firm, steady. Vincent. I know your pain, he whispered, his voice like velvet in the storm of my mind. It's a deep chasm, no different from my own. You don't have any friends. The ones you do have, they abuse you, they use you. But not me. I won't ever leave you, my pet. I'm here with you. Always. The dam inside me broke. A sob tore through my throat, and I collapsed against him, clutching his shirt like a lifeline. Vincent, please, take the pain away. His arms tightened around me, a promise in his hold. Yes, my pet, he murmured, his voice laced with something dark and possessive. I will. The kiss shattered my resolve and knocked the wind out of me, my entire body going slack against him. It was no gentle meeting of lips. This was a world-destroying kiss. His mouth crashed into mine with a fierce, hungry desperation that consumed every inch of me. His lips were demanding, pulling, and taking everything I had to give, like he was claiming me, marking me as his in that single moment. My senses blurred as I melted into him, heat flooding my veins, burning away any resistance I had left. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer, until there was no space left between us. I could feel his heartbeat thundering in time with my own, the raw intensity of it swearing into my skin. It wasn't just a kiss. It was like the ground cracked open beneath me, the world tilting on its axis as he pulled me deeper into his orbit. His teeth grazed my lower lip, and a low, guttural growl rumbled from his chest. My head spun, my knees weakening under the force of it. It was like falling into a bottomless pit. The air sucked out of the room, leaving nothing but him. Nothing but Vincent. The kiss was brutal, unrelenting, as if he was consuming me, tasting the very essence of my soul. Every touch, every press of his lips against mine felt like fire licking at my skin, burning me alive. My thoughts splintered, scattering into nothingness as I let myself drown in him, in the sheer power of his kiss. There was no escaping it, no turning back. At that moment, Vincent wasn't just kissing me. He was tearing down every wall I had, breaking through every barrier until all that remained was him. Only him. Chapter 6. I woke up tangled in Vincent's arms, the white sheets bunched around my waist, my body still aching from the night before. Fading light sliced through the narrow slit in the curtains, casting a soft, golden glow across the room. Vincent stirred beside me, his lips finding mine in a lazy kiss. His beard scraped against my chin, sending shivers down my spine, while his plush lips claimed mine with a slow, possessive hunger. I sighed into the delicious warmth of it, my sore body melting into his embrace. We had made love all last night, a relentless passion that left me drained but yearning for more. I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him closer, his scent of cloves and earth filling my senses, intoxicating me all over again. My heart fluttered as I tasted him, the musk of his skin lingering on my tongue, and I felt grounded, safe. This kiss, tender and consuming, was everything. It was home. "Wait," I laughed as he slotted on top of me, continuing his kiss down my neck. "Vincent," I gasped. "Mm-hmm," he hummed, then paused, pulling away. "What is it, pet?" I turned away, feeling my face flush with heat, but when I scanned the room, my eyes landed on the window again. Crap, it's dusk. We missed our chance. Vincent scrambled out of bed, and I did the same, ignoring the pain as I shrugged on my shirt and pulled on my jeans. Crap. We wouldn't get another chance at this. "There's gasoline downstairs," he spoke urgently. "Just pour it on the coffins and I'll do the rest. Make sure you aren't seen and wait for me. Once they wake up, I will light the room up. Meet me outside where it's safe, okay?" "Okay," I breathed. He pulled me into his arms for a kiss. "Be safe. Hurry." He shoved me lightly and then raced out the door. I sprinted down the hall, Vincent's instructions ringing in my ears, my heart thundering in my chest as I ran toward the basement. The heavy door groaned as I pushed it open, and the stench of decay hit me hard. Inside, rows and rows of ancient coffins lined the walls, each one more decrepit than the last. There was no time to hesitate. Grabbing the gasoline, I poured it over the coffins as fast as I could, the acrid scent stinging my nose. My hands shook, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Lucien was dangerous. That much was true, and I knew putting him down was the right thing to do. When I finished, something tugged at me, pulling me down the corridor toward a room at the far end. I didn't know how I knew it was Lucien's, but there was a pull, a dark, suffocating presence. I rushed inside. His coffin was different from the others. It was larger, made from rich, dark mahogany, intricately carved with serpentine designs, with gold inlays that shimmered under the dim light. The lid was embellished with black iron, twisted into sharp, wicked spikes. It looked more like a throne than a resting place. I didn't hesitate. I unscrewed the cap of the gasoline can and poured it all over, drenching the elaborate wood. The liquid glistened on the ornate designs, filling the air with the pungent scent of fuel. I made sure not to miss a single spot. Then the coffin tore open. Lucien gasped, his hands flying to his throat, clawing at it like he was suffocating. I jumped back, my heart lurching painfully in my chest. His eyes bulged, wide and panicked, his breaths coming in shallow, broken gasps. He looked at me with a mixture of desperation and rage, but he couldn't speak. His nightclothes were quickly soaked in gasoline, and he fell out of his coffin, collapsing on the floor, wheezing and thrashing. What's wrong with him? I stood frozen in place. Uneasiness coiled in my stomach as I watched, paralyzed, unable to look away. There was something terribly wrong. Lucien wasn't just waking. He was choking, convulsing, like the gasoline was burning him from the inside out. His eyes locked onto mine, wild and desperate. A wave of nausea rolled over me, and my legs refused to move. Lucien laughed. It was enough to make my skin crawl. I see it now. What a grand plan my brother has. Don't come any closer. I backed away. Lucien bared his teeth. You fool! You absolute fool! He coughed violently. What did he poison me with? Poison? What? I backed away. Lucien hissed and spat at me, feral as his eyes turned blood red. The scent of gasoline stung my nostrils, and I just wanted to get the hell out of there. You think you've won? Haha. How could I expect anything less? The Vampire King's pet. He spat the words mockingly. Just who do you think was his pet first? Lucien roared. The blood froze in my veins. What? No, It wasn't true. What are you talking about? Lucian's laugh crackled, blood now pouring from his mouth. We had the same maker, Dorian. But I have and always will be Vincent's first pet. Let me guess. He fed you his memories. Fed you his pain. His agony at watching over you. Lucian laughed harder. Just like he did your little friend, Lucian wheezed. He does that to all of them. You're no different. So stop it. It was all lies, right? However, the more I thought about it, the more Lance's warnings made sense, and the near rabid look in his eyes whenever Vincent was mentioned. Vincent had admitted to manipulating me and feeding off me when I didn't know it, but that was before I found out what I was. Dorian killed your mother because she was keeping your father alive as a blood bag, as a human pet. Our laws forbid it. Humans must be killed, disposed of. A blood bag? A human pet? Those were the same words Vincent said to me, but he used them as terms of endearment. What did they really mean? And why was I still talking to this maniac? Doubt crept into my thoughts, like a shadow. I barely knew anything about Vincent, and already I was willing to kill for him. Did that make me crazy too? But the people downstairs, the bodies piled up, I stuttered. Were they mine or his? Lucian demanded. You spineless sycophant. Don't you see what he's turned you into, what you'll become? Those were yours, I hissed at him. I've seen you drain humans, slaughter them. Don't try to twist this. Vincent is saving the world from you. Lucian's face looked demonic. And who will save the world from him? He lunged. Instinct kicked in as I barely dodged his outstretched claws. His teeth bared, and he snapped at me like a feral beast, aiming straight for my throat. Panic surged through me. I grabbed the gasoline can, swung it like a weapon, and brought it crashing down on his head. The sound echoed through the room, a sickening thud, but he barely staggered. Lucian retaliated, delivering a swift punch to my gut. The air rushed from my lungs, and I crumpled over his fist, the pain hitting me like an iron hammer. Gasping, I scrambled for anything I could use, my vision hazy. My hand closed around a heavy mallet lying in the corner. I swung it with all my might, smashing it against his skull. Lucian stumbled back, eyes wide with fury, but I wasn't done. We were locked in a brutal ballet, clawing and punching, the air crackling with tension. Each hit felt like fire against my skin, but I fought through the pain, adrenaline surging. Vincent burst into the room, a storm of fury and desperation. Lucian roared, eyes turning blood red, his voice a terrifying growl. You dare to try to kill me? Vincent's form blurred as he moved, a whirlwind of speed and power. I was your pet, Lucian screamed. No more, Vincent snarled, slamming Lucian into the wall with a bone-crushing force. Blue fire erupted from his hand, illuminating the room with an otherworldly glow. Vincent unleashed the flames, engulfing Lucian. The scream that erupted from his lips was a sound of pure agony, reverberating through the air as his body ignited in a brilliant blaze. I stumbled back, shock paralyzing me for a moment as I watched him thrash in the fire, his form contorting and twisting in a horrific dance. The room erupted into chaos as fire engulfed everything in its path, the flames dancing and crackling with a ferocity that mirrored my own racing heart. We need to move, Vincent shouted. Without a moment's hesitation, we darted out the door. Just as we crossed the threshold, a thunderous explosion ripped through the lower level of the mansion, sending dirt and debris flying in every direction. My ears rang with the force of the blast, a low rumble that felt like it shook the very ground beneath us. Vincent seized my hand, his grip like a vice, and yanked me down the staircase, the heat from the fire licking at our heels. I could feel the intense heat radiating from the inferno behind us, almost like a living entity chasing us down. We burst through the front door, tumbling onto the cool grass outside, just as the entire house erupted into flames. The explosion sent us rolling, the shockwave hitting me like a freight train. I gasped as we landed, the ground knocking the wind out of me. Flames shot up toward the sky, illuminating the night like a hellish beacon, while smoke billowed and choked the air around us. I lay there for a moment, stunned, heart racing as I turned to Vincent. Are you okay? He asked, his voice strained but steady. I think so, I managed, still dazed. eyes wide as I took in the blazing wreckage of the mansion. Sirens blared in the background, and I willed my heart rate to slow as I slumped back down on the grass. Staring up at the sky, I felt like the earth was moving, and then Vincent's face blocked my view. He leaned down and kissed me, tangling his fingers through my hair. "Thank you," he whispered. My mouth curled into a smile. "Honestly, I don't think you needed me." "Still, thank you. I can't tell you what this means to me," Vincent murmured, stroking my cheek. I sighed, slumping against the grass. "What he said about being your first pet, was it true?" "Yes," Vincent said. "We were companions for 100 years. So, what changed?" "You," Vincent replied, then kissed me again. "We were never fated. Some vampires can become companions, but they won't be fated like we are. I never felt the pull I felt towards you." "And he wouldn't let you go?" I probed. "No," Vincent smiled sadly. "If I were him, I wouldn't have either. Lucian would have tormented you. Killing him was for the best." "And Lance?" I swallowed. "What did you do to him?" "I was weak, like I said. I used him for the night. Humans get possessive and addicted once they have our blood. He'll be fine in a few weeks." I released a breath as the cop cars pulled up the driveway. It looked like the night was just beginning. "So, what will you do now?" Vincent's mouth curled into a smile. "I bought a penthouse near the University of Philadelphia. I'm sure I can find something to occupy my time with." Then, his lips found mine again. I didn't ask how Lucien was poisoned or if the other vampires needed to die too. For now, I was okay, sinking deeper into the illusion of his warm embrace. "Where the hell have you been?" Lance screeched upon my arrival. "I almost went crazy and called the police." I took off my designer sunglasses, smoothing down my brand new gray pea coat. Vincent's sleek black BMW was waiting for me outside the apartment, a promise of something new, something I'd finally chosen for myself. I casually strolled past him, went to my room, and started to pack my things. Lance continued to follow me, shouting about my irresponsibility. "Wait, where are you going?" "I'm moving in with Vincent," I said, my voice steady as I shoved clothes into my suitcase, not sparing him a glance. "You've got to be kidding me. Don't tell me his D game was that good. Now you're shacking up with him? That's crazy." I could feel my irritation rise with each word he spat. "Well, if it doesn't work out, don't come crying to me. And you certainly won't be getting your room back. I'll tell all your Johns not to call you, so you'll have to get a real job." His voice was shrilled, desperation leaking through the bravado. After packing my suitcase, I finally turned to face him. Lance was a mess. Pupils were blown wide, hair in disarray, and I wondered why I'd ever started hanging out with him in the first place. At the time, I had been lonely and desperate, a fish in the sea of students with no family to keep me grounded. Now things were different. I had Vincent. I had the king. "Look, I'm sorry I didn't call. I'm sorry I wasn't a better friend to you, but I'm leaving now. Have a nice life." I stepped past him, heart pounding with the thrill of stepping into the unknown. Lance gaped at me, and I could almost see the gears turning in his head as I walked out the door. I tossed my stuff into the trunk and then slid into the passenger's side beside Vincent. He greeted me with a kiss that sent a shiver down my spine. "Did you tell him all about our weekend?" he asked, pulling out of the driveway smoothly, the city flashing by outside the tinted windows. A smile curled my lips, and I let my fangs slip free, feeling empowered and exhilarated. "I told him I broke all your rules, and it was the best weekend ever." Vincent raised an eyebrow, amusement dancing in his luminous eyes. "And how much of that was the truth?" I leaned back, savoring the warmth of his presence. Enough to know I'm never going back. I didn't ask how he read my mind, or the gaping holes in his story. Nothing else mattered in the world of vampires. The car glided through the streets, and I felt the weight of my past slipping away. With every mile we put between us and that apartment, I could breathe easier, my future unfolding like the open road ahead. I was the Vampire King's pet, and he was mine. The end. Closing. Thank you for listening to The Vampire's Pet, M. Vampire Romance, written by J.K. Jones and narrated by Chris Moore. We hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future audiobooks. We appreciate your support and the time you've taken to join us on this adventure.